Okay, welcome to the third video of this series, and this time we will actually start working with iTree Eco. So we went through the process of discussing where we wanted to create our project for the high school and talking about dividing it up into a couple sections. Now what I have here is the landing page when you launch iTree Eco, and I went ahead and did this through my start menu, which is on a different screen. And when Eco first brings you to a starting point, it usually starts off with this what's new. It tells you what the version is, 6.022. This is all good information for you to keep handy if you ever have problems. That's one of the first questions that you want to make sure that you tell technical support that you're working with version 6.022. You can always check and see if there are updates available by clicking this tab, and then you can access many of the resources that we discussed in the first video, like the manuals and guides from within the application, the video learning also through this section too, the methods documents and so forth too. So it's just a good resource. You can see that everything else is pretty much darkened out, so you can't access any of these until you actually start creating a project. You can look at things like the species list of available species in iTree Eco, and I believe there are probably about maybe 9,000 or so. One thing you'll notice is that, without going through a deep dive on this, is that there's just a hardwood and actually there's a softwood, a PI class. So there is not an unknown, because Eco has to have some type of information to estimate ecosystem services. But there are many species, and there are ways to add in new species using iTree database. So let's go ahead and get started. One of the first things that we're going to do is you're going to have to start with creating a new project. If you had an existing project, then you can go back to that. And so this is a crossroad here that's pretty critical. You have really two options only available: a complete inventory, which means that you're just collecting the trees that you're interested in. It doesn't mean that you have to collect every tree in a park. It's just those trees that you want to collect. So it could be one tree in your yard, 10 trees that you planted, 20 trees on a city block or so forth, or all the street trees of a city, thousands of trees. If it's a plot sample, that would be something that you would be interested, say, in doing a very large scale study, and then you would make up plots, and usually it's a 10th acre, collect all the data within those plots. Eco then aggregates the data upward and gives you estimates with standard error. Complete inventory, a much easier learning curve to start with. The data collection for trees is very similar. So let's select that, and we shall proceed. So what this will do is ask you to create a project name, and I will just call this George Washington High School Demo. And we will just save this on the desktop for now. And so now what this is doing is it brings us to multiple panels that we are going to have to work our way through and just populate some data. So there's just some basic steps here. We will give it a project name, a series name, project name. Series is not too, don't put too much thought into this. This is just really if a relic from an old application where somebody might have, say, a city, and then they wanted to have multiple series. So a series for parks, a series for neighborhoods, a series for some other entity. That it has no bearing really on any of what Eco does. It's more or less just to accommodate old data. Okay, so that's all we really need to do. And you can see complete inventory. You can't go back and change this once you get started. So that's a critical piece of information. So now we're going to use our location information. This is critical too, because this is what Eco uses to kind of determine a lot of the things in terms of the characteristics of your city. And so, this is made up for a city in the US, but there are multiple locations available throughout the world for other folks who may check out these videos. And so, some of these places you'll see, but they're not enabled. Many places are enabled, so I don't have time to integrate that part in here, but you can actually go in and look at the iTree database or the international section to look at the partner countries: Europe, Mexico, Canada, South Korea, Colombia, and there's a few others that I'm missing off the top of my head, have already been integrated, and then many individual cities. So Delhi, India, Sao Paulo, Brazil, and a number of other, Hong Kong, and other many cities throughout the world. International users have that option. So we're just working in the states here, and I'm just going to go through and populate the state, city, county data for City of Chicago. And much of this is populated with some of the background information in the database, gives you the population, urban areas. If it's a rural area, you can uncheck that. There's data here too also in the help panel, which will kind of tell you what these mean. So I'm not going to go into differentiating what these are just because of the time that I'm trying to restrict this to keep this to a very minimal amount. Pollution and weather year. So this is something that is important, and you'll see here at the time of making this video in June of 2021, we only have 2018 weather, 2017 weather, but pollution data isn't available yet. So this all has to be pre-processed and packaged into iTree before it's available for you to use. That doesn't mean that you can't use it. It just means that you have to use, if you want pollution modeling, you're going to have to go back and use 2016 pollution data. This is pretty much common for just about every eco user, just because of the limitation and the amount of time that it takes to get global data or data even within one country, pre-process it, and build it into these tools. So 2016 is what we have. This will probably be expanded on, and then you'll have maybe 2017 and 2018 fairly soon. Usually it's about 2 years behind or so. So we're running a little behind with getting this updated. And then we have the weather station. So pollution and weather kind of are tied together, and you will typically always have to select the same pollution and weather. So our weather is also going to be 2016 because that's the pollution data we're using. The model needs to use those two variables together, those data packages, because pollution is affected by weather. So you have to have them from the same year. So I'm going to go ahead and hit the show map, and this brings up a weather selector screen. And so this is what you have. It's showing us like where we have weather station available to select from. And so this school that we're doing this project is on the south side of Chicago, so it's sort of towards this area down at the bottom. Even though I've selected Chicago as the area, I know that either Midway is probably closer, or even some of these other airports, but I'm going to go ahead and select Chicago Midway. And so you'll see here too that this gives you some information. It shows you the hourly precipitation data, because that's what ECO uses, hourly precipitation throughout a year, and 6-hour events. So this gives you an idea of the annual precipitation that it's using for the modeling. Additionally, here it also tells you a little bit about the data completeness. It says poor. Now don't let that say, okay, well I can't use this because this is poor. It's just telling you that the data that is available in these national weather sets is not complete. So I'm going to go ahead and select that, and then I can kind of come over to the side here. And if you want to read a little bit more about, well, what does poor data entail, it tells you like how many events are missing of those hourly data, and where some interpolation has to be performed in order for that data to be usable within the ECO application, because it's using hourly time steps for pollution and weather throughout a whole calendar year for the modeling in the background. One last item I wanted to mention here is that we have the ability to see where our pollution data is actually coming from, and this is kind of helpful. And so ECO has, I think it's about maybe 5 different pollutants. They don't necessarily always come from the same station. Ideally, there would be a station that's nearby to where you're working or doing your project, but in many cases, you're going to find, like in this case here, ozone comes from this one station, but then ozone is also used from this station along with nitrogen dioxide and sulfur dioxide. So it's probably average when you see multiple items listed. And so in some cases, you're going to find that the data that's used for modeling is either average from multiple locations, or if it's not available, it might be coming from a source that's very far away. PM 2.5. Gary is not that far away from where this particular project location is, but it's not on site, and so Gary is near an industrial area too. So that is something just to take into consideration. It uses the closest available pollution that is available, but it is not necessarily always going to be as local as you would like. So this is something that's hard-coded that the application ties into based on the location information. So it's not something that you can say, I'm going to select closer data. There is a way to provide newer data, but it's a little bit more to kind of go into using iTree database, and there's some limitations into doing that also. So that's something that you can model with now, use the data that is available, and then consider on options to upgrading that data in the future. So I'm going to break this up into another video, and so before we talk about data collection, just because that is a little bit more time consuming. So just to kind of recap quickly, we set up our project location, and then we provided some location information, selected a weather and pollution year, and then selected a weather station. Next up, we will talk about data collection options. This is where you make some of the most critical decisions regarding what data you want to actually collect for your project.